Captain Zexhi's forearms trembled as he stared at the tactical display. The peaceful morning had turned into a nightmare in less than 30 minutes. His ship, the Serenity's wing, was completely surrounded by massive warships that belonged to the most feared pirates in the galaxy. The Krillian raiders. Zexhi was a Valerian, a species that had never known war. His people were plant-eaters with thin, delicate bodies and soft shells that could barely protect them from a strong wind. They explored the galaxy with joy and wonder, studying new worlds and making friends with other peaceful species. Violence was something they only read about in history books. But now, 8 huge enemy ships floated around them like hungry predators. Each one was 3 times larger than the Serenity's wing. Their dark metal hulls were covered with weapon ports and battle scars from countless fights. Smaller fighter ships buzzed around them like angry insects, ready to attack at any moment. Lieutenant Lithara, the ship's communications officer, looked up from her station with wide, frightened eyes. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Captain, they are demanding our surrender. They want to take our ship and sell us as slaves." Zexhi closed his eyes and tried to think. His crew of 12 Valerians was completely helpless. Their ship had no real weapons, just small mining lasers meant for cutting through asteroids. Their shields were designed to protect against space debris, not military weapons. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. "How did they find us so quickly?" asked Dr. Kethama, the ship's chief science officer. She was examining the sensor readings with growing panic. "We were just conducting a routine survey of the Kepler 442 system. There was no indication of hostile forces in this area." The answer came from the largest enemy ship. A deep, threatening voice filled their bridge through the communication system. "Weak little prey, you stumbled into our territory. This system belongs to Warlord Gracthal and the Krillian raiders. Your ship and your lives now belong to us." Zexhi had heard stories about Gracthal. The Krillian warlord was known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. He captured ships, enslaved crews, and destroyed anything that stood in his way. His raiders had terrorized peaceful species for decades, always attacking the weak and defenseless. "Captain," whispered Engineer Dexel from his station, "our engines are damaged from their first attack. We cannot run. Our shields are down to 20%. We cannot fight. What do we do?" Zexhi looked around at his crew. They were all young, all innocent. They had joined the Galactic Confederation's exploration service to see the wonders of the universe, not to die at the hands of pirates. He had to find a way to save them. "Lithara," he said quietly, "send out a distress signal. Use the emergency frequency. Tell them we need immediate backup." Lithara's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "Message sent, Captain. Standard. Confederation distress call. I told them we are surrounded by hostile forces and need backup units immediately." The crew waited in silence. Minutes passed like hours. The Krillian ships moved closer, their weapons charging with ominous energy. Zexhi could see the smaller fighter ships getting ready to dock with his vessel. Soon, armored Krillian soldiers would board his ship and everything would be over. "Any response to our distress call?" Zexhi asked. "Yes, Captain," Lithara said, her voice filled with confusion. "But it is strange. The response is not from a Confederation patrol fleet. It is from something called a Terran vessel. They say they are coming to help us." Zexhi frowned. He had never heard of Terrans before. "Check the database. What species are these Terrans?" Dr. Kethama worked at her science station, searching through the Confederation's vast library of known species. After a few moments, she looked up with a puzzled expression. "Captain, I found them. They are also called humans. They come from a planet called Earth." "What does the database say about them?" Zexhi asked. Kethama read from her screen, her voice growing more concerned with each word. "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. The inhabitants are listed as Tier 7 predators. The database recommends extreme caution when dealing with this species." The bridge fell silent. Every member of the crew knew what those classifications meant. A Class 12 death world was a planet so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing on it. Tier 7. Predators were among the most dangerous life forms in the galaxy. "Captain," Lithara said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we called for backup from Deathworlders. What have we done?" Before HFY could answer, the communication system crackled to life. A new voice came through, speaking in a language that their universal translator struggled to process. The voice was strong and confident, completely different from the refined tones of Confederation species. "Serenity's Wing, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran vessel Horizon's Edge. We received your distress call. Hold tight, we're coming to get you." HFY activated the communication channel with shaking hands. "Terran vessel, this is Captain HFY of the Serenity's Wing. We appreciate your response, but you must understand the situation. We are surrounded by 8 Krillian warships and dozens of fighter craft. The odds are impossible. Perhaps you should contact the Confederation fleet instead." Captain Morrison's response sent chills through the Valerian crew. There was something in his voice, something that spoke of violence and danger. "Captain, we are your backup, and we don't worry about odds." Warlord Grakthul's voice suddenly interrupted their conversation. The Krillian leader had been listening to their communications, and his laughter filled the bridge. "More prey arrives. To join the feast. These humans will make excellent slaves. Their ship will be a fine addition to my fleet." HFY tried to warn the approaching humans. "Captain Morrison, you must understand. Warlord Grakthul commands a massive fleet. Your single ship cannot possibly fight them all. You should retreat while you still can." "Negative, Captain," Morrison replied. "You called for backup, and backup is what you're getting. We'll be there in 10 minutes. As the communication ended, HFY stared at the tactical display. Somewhere, in the distance, a single ship full of Deathworlders was racing toward them. He didn't know if they were being rescued, or if they had just made their situation much worse. The Krillian fighters began moving into attack formation, eager to destroy the new arrivals. Warlord Grakthul's voice boomed across the system, filled with cruel amusement. "Let them come. We will show these humans what happens to those who dare challenge the Krillian raiders." HFY could only watch and wait, wondering what kind of beings they had called for help. The space around Kepler 442 suddenly rippled as the Horizon's Edge dropped out of hyperspace. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his ship's bridge, studying the tactical display with the calm focus of a man who had seen war many times before. His weathered face showed no emotion as he counted the enemy ships. 8 heavy cruisers, 43 fighters, and 1 command vessel, reported Commander Lisa Hayes from her position at the weapon station. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and scars on her hands from countless battles. "The Valerian ship is badly damaged. Hull breaches on 3 decks, shields at 15%. Morrison nodded slowly. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. These were not the soft scientists that filled most Confederation vessels. The Horizon's Edge carried veterans of Earth's colonial wars, people who had fought in the asteroid, mines of Ceres, and the jungle cities of New Brazil. They knew violence in ways that most galactic species could never understand. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Tony Martinez from the communications station, "the Valerian captain is trying to contact us again." "Put him through," Morrison ordered. Captain HFY's frightened voice filled the bridge. "Captain Morrison, please listen to me. You must retreat immediately. The Krillian raiders have over 50 ships. Your single vessel cannot possibly survive. Against such numbers, I beg you to call for proper military support." Morrison looked at his crew. Chief Engineer Ryan Cooper was checking weapon systems with a grin on his face. Dr. Amanda Foster was studying alien behavioral patterns on her screen, preparing for what was coming. Sergeant Danny Rodriguez was already suiting up his Marines for combat. These people didn't know the meaning of retreat. "Captain HFY," Morrison said calmly, "we appreciate your concern, but we didn't come here to run away. You asked for help, and we're going to give it to you." The Valerian's voice became desperate. "But you do not understand. These are the most feared pirates in the galaxy. Warlord Grakthul has destroyed entire fleets. Your ship is so small compared to theirs." Morrison smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Captain, let me explain something to you. Where we come from, We don't measure strength by the size of our ships. We measure it by how hard we're willing to fight. Before Zexai could respond, another voice cut into the conversation. Warlord Grakthul's deep, threatening tone filled both ships. So the brave humans have arrived at last. I have been curious about your species since I intercepted your communications. Tell me, little prey, how does it feel to know you are about to die? Morrison's response was ice cold. Warlord, you're about to find out what happens when you threaten people under our protection. Grakthul's laughter boomed across the system. Your protection? You command one tiny ship against my entire fleet. Are all humans this foolish, or are you special? We're special, Morrison replied. But not in the way you think. On the Serenity's wing, Captain Zexai watched in horror as the human ship began moving toward the Krillian fleet. The horizon's edge was less than half the size of the smallest enemy cruiser, yet it advanced without hesitation. The Valerians could not understand this behavior. In their culture, facing impossible odds meant surrender or retreat. Fighting was only logical when victory was possible. Dr. Kethama studied her sensors in confusion. Captain, the human ship, is not behaving like any vessel I've seen before. Their energy signatures are strange. Their hull composition includes materials I do not recognize. Lieutenant Lithara was monitoring human communications. Sir, they are speaking to each other, in their own language. The translator is having difficulty, but I think they are discussing attack plans. They seem excited about the coming battle. Zexai felt sick. These humans were not just willing to fight impossible odds, they were looking forward to it. What kind of species enjoyed violence so much? On the horizon's edge, the crew prepared for combat with practiced efficiency. Sergeant Rodriguez addressed his Marines over the internal communication system. Listen up, people. We've got alien pirates who like to prey on peaceful species. They think they're tough because they beat up on plant eaters and scientists. Time to show them what real predators look like. Dr. Foster studied the Krillian ship. Designs on her computer. Captain, I've analyzed their vessels. They're built for intimidation, not efficiency. Heavy armor, lots of weapons, but they're slow and clumsy. Their tactics rely on overwhelming force against weaker opponents. Morrison nodded. And they've never fought anyone who hits back properly. Lisa, what's our weapons status? Commander. Hayes checked her displays. All systems green, sir. Kinetic weapons loaded and ready. Point defense systems online. Boarding pods prepped and loaded. Chief Engineer Cooper called out from his station. Captain, I've been monitoring their communications. The Krillians are using old encryption methods. I can break into their systems. If you give me 5 minutes. Do it, Morrison ordered. I want to know everything about their ship positions and defensive systems. Meanwhile, the Krillian fleet was positioning itself for what they thought would be an easy victory. Warlord Grakthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel called the Blood Fist. Around him, his officers prepared their weapons, with lazy confidence. Commander Vexkar, Grakthul said to his second-in-command, deploy the fighters. Surround the human ship. I want them to see how hopeless their situation is before we destroy them. Vexkar was a scarred veteran of dozens of raids. Sir, should we attempt to capture their vessel, it might contain useful technology. Grakthul considered this. Yes. Disable their engines, but keep the ship intact. I want to interrogate these humans before I sell them. Any species stupid enough to fight us might have valuable information. The Krillian fighters moved into attack formation, their weapons charging with deadly energy. From their perspective, this was just another easy victory against foolish prey. They had no idea what they were really facing. On the Serenity's wing, the Valerian crew watched the human ship with growing amazement. Instead of fleeing or trying to negotiate, the horizon's edge was actually accelerating toward the enemy fleet. Captain Zexai had never seen anything like it. They are moving directly toward the largest concentration of enemy ships, Dr. Kethama reported in disbelief. This is not a retreat. This is not evasion. They are attacking. Lieutenant Lithara looked up from her communications console with wide eyes. Captain, I just intercepted a human transmission. They said something about showing the pirates what a real Deathworld species can do. HFY realized with growing terror that they had not called for backup. They had called for something far more dangerous. These humans were not coming to rescue them with superior numbers or better technology. They were coming to fight with something the galaxy had never seen before. Pure, unleashed aggression from a species that had evolved to survive on one of the most dangerous planets in the universe. The battle began exactly the way the Krillians expected it to end. Their 43 fighters swarmed toward the lone human ship like a pack of wolves closing in on wounded prey. Energy beams lanced through space, creating a web of deadly light that should have torn the horizon's edge apart in seconds. But the human ship was no longer where the weapons were aimed. Captain Morrison had ordered evasive maneuvers that defied everything the Krillians knew about space combat. The horizon's edge twisted and spun through the incoming fire with movements so sudden and violent that they would have killed any normal crew from the force alone. But humans were not normal crew. They had evolved on a world where quick reflexes meant the difference between life and death. Direct hit on Fighter Group 7, Commander Hayes reported calmly as she watched 3 Krillian ships explode into debris. Kinetic rounds are performing better than expected against their hull armor. Warlord Grakthul stared at his tactical display in confusion. How are they moving like that? No ship should be able to turn so sharply without destroying its own crew. His weapons officer, a nervous Krillian named Dexmol, checked his instruments twice before reporting. Sir, their ship is pulling 15 G-forces in those turns. Any crew should be dead from the acceleration alone. What the Krillians did not understand was that humans had spent thousands of years adapting to extreme conditions. Earth's high gravity, violent weather, and constant dangers had created a species that could survive forces that would kill most galactic races. The human crew wore acceleration suits and took drugs that let their bodies handle stress that would turn other beings into liquid. Dr. Foster monitored the enemy communications from her science station. Captain, the Krillians are panicking. Their fighters are having trouble tracking our movements. They keep firing where we were, not where we are. Morrison smiled grimly. That's because they fight like bullies, not soldiers. They're used to beating up on people who can't fight back. Lisa, time for Phase 2. Commander Hayes launched the next part of their attack plan. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, the horizon's edge used tactics that seemed insane to everyone watching. The ship dove toward the nearest asteroid, using the rocky debris as cover while firing kinetic rounds at impossible angles. The kinetic weapons were something new to this part of the galaxy. Most species used energy beams, or plasma cannons. But humans had perfected the ancient art of throwing rocks, just with much more precision and speed. Chunks of metal accelerated to incredible velocities slammed into Krillian ships with devastating results. Chief Engineer Cooper had modified these weapons during their long journey through space. Captain, the tungsten rounds are penetrating. Their shields like they're not even there. Their defensive systems are designed for energy weapons, not solid projectiles. On the Serenity's wing, Captain HFY and his crew watched the battle with growing amazement. The impossible was happening right before their eyes. A single small ship was not just surviving against overwhelming odds, it was winning. How are they doing this? Dr. Kethama whispered, staring at her sensor readings. They just destroyed 5 fighter craft with one shot. Their weapons are primitive kinetic projectiles, but they're more effective than our most advanced energy cannons. Lieutenant Lithara was monitoring all frequencies, trying to understand the human communications. Captain, they're coordinating their attacks with mathematical precision. They calculate trajectories, predict enemy movements, and plan their strikes several moves ahead. It's like they're playing a game they've mastered. The turning point came when Sergeant Rodriguez launched his boarding operation. This was the moment that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Instead of trying to disable the enemy ships from the outside, the humans did something that no civilized species had attempted in centuries. They boarded enemy vessels in the middle of active combat. Boarding pods away, Rodriguez reported over the communication system. His voice was calm, professional, and completely terrifying to anyone who understood what he was attempting. Target is the command cruiser Bloodfist. Estimated arrival in 90 seconds. Warlord Grakthul received the report from his security chief with disbelief. They're doing what? No one is insane enough to board a ship during battle. Their pods will be destroyed before they reach us. But the boarding pods were not like anything the Krillians had seen before. They were small, heavily armored, and moved with the same impossible agility as the main ship. The humans piloted them through the battle zone like they were born to, fly through deadly crossfire. Dr. Foster had studied Krillian psychology for years, and she provided tactical advice that proved devastating. Sergeant, the Krillians panic when faced with close combat. They rely on long-range weapons and superior numbers. Once you're inside their ship, they won't know how to respond. Rodriguez and his team of 20 Marines crashed through the hull of the Bloodfist with explosive force. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The Marines fought through the ship's corridors with a combination of advanced tactics and primitive savagery that the Krillians had never encountered. The Krillian soldiers were used to fighting other civilized species who followed rules of engagement, who tried to minimize casualties, who believed in honor and mercy. Humans followed different rules. They fought to win, and they used every advantage their harsh homeworld had given them. Deck 7 secured, Rodriguez reported as his team advanced toward the bridge. Enemy resistance is lighter than expected. They seem confused by our tactics. The confusion was understandable. Krillian warriors were trained for traditional space combat. They expected enemies to use cover, to advance carefully, to retreat when wounded. Human Marines did none of these things. They moved through enemy fire like it was rain, ignored wounds that would cripple other species, and attacked with a ferocity that seemed almost supernatural. Commander Vexkar tried to organize a defense of the bridge, but his soldiers were already breaking. They're not stopping, he reported to Grakthul in a voice filled with terror. We hit them with plasma charges that would kill a dozen normal soldiers, and they just keep coming. What are these creatures? The answer came when Rodriguez's team breached the bridge. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, disabling defensive systems and securing key personnel in less than 3 minutes. Warlord Grakthul found himself staring down the barrel of a human weapon, while his command ship burned around him. Warlord, Rodriguez said calmly, you have 2 choices. Order your fleet to surrender or watch us destroy every ship you have. Grakthul looked into the human's eyes and saw something that chilled him to his core. These were not the eyes of a civilized being. These were the eyes of a predator, from a world where only the strongest survived. He realized that his fleet had not encountered mere backup forces. They had encountered Deathworlders in their natural element. The battle was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The silence that followed the battle was more terrifying than the fighting itself. Where moments before there had been the chaos of energy weapons and exploding ships, now there was only the quiet hum of surrendered vessels and the occasional crackle of damaged communication systems. Warlord Grakthul sat in his command chair, staring at the human Marine who held him at gunpoint. His massive frame, which had intimidated countless species across the galaxy, seemed small and pathetic next to Sergeant Rodriguez. The human soldier stood calmly, his weapon never wavering, his eyes showing no emotion at all. Your fleet has surrendered, Rodriguez said in a matter-of-fact tone. 41 ships captured, 7 destroyed, 0 escaped. Your raids in this sector are over. Grakthul tried to understand what had happened. His fleet had been the terror of 3-star systems. They had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved millions of beings, and never faced serious resistance. Now they had been defeated by a single ship with a crew of less than 200 humans. How? He whispered. How is this possible? Rodriguez looked at him with something that might have been pity. You picked on the wrong species, Warlord. You're used to fighting people who value their own lives more than victory. We come from a world that taught us different lessons. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Captain Morrison was coordinating the cleanup operation. His crew worked with the same calm efficiency they had shown during the battle. Commander Hayes was cataloging captured vessels, Chief Engineer Cooper was analyzing Krillian technology, and Dr. Foster was documenting everything for her report to Earth Command. Sir, Lieutenant Martinez called out from his communications station. The Valerian captain is requesting permission to come aboard. He says he needs to thank us personally. Morrison nodded. Grant permission, and Tony, make sure the docking bay is clean. Our guests have been through enough without seeing what our Marines look like after a fight. 20 minutes later, Captain HFY and Dr. Kethema were escorted onto the human ship. The Valerians moved carefully, their large eyes taking in every detail of their surroundings. What they saw confused them even more than the battle had. The horizon's edge looked nothing like the warships in their databases. The corridors were plain and functional, with no decorations or displays of power. The crew they passed were professional but not threatening. These humans acted like the violence they had just unleashed was simply part of their daily routine. Captain Morrison met them in his ready room, a small space with simple furniture and walls covered with star charts. He was drinking something hot from a metal cup and reviewing damage reports on a tablet computer. When the Valerians entered, he stood and offered them seats. Captain HFY, Morrison said with a slight smile, I hope your crew is uninjured. Our medical team is standing by if anyone needs treatment. HFY stared at the human commander. This being had just destroyed the most feared pirate fleet in the sector, and he was offering medical assistance like nothing unusual had happened. Captain Morrison, I do not understand. Your species, your methods, everything about this situation is beyond my comprehension. Dr. Foster entered the room, carrying a datapad filled with cultural analysis. She had spent the last hour studying Valerian psychology and customs, preparing for this conversation. Captain HFY, I think I can help explain. You come from a peaceful world with no natural predators. Your species evolved to cooperate and avoid conflict. This makes perfect sense for your environment. HFY nodded slowly. Yes, this is true. We have never known war or violence. Until today, I thought, all intelligent species shared these values. That's where you're wrong, Dr. Foster continued gently. Humans come from what you call a death world. Every day of our evolution was a fight for survival. We learned to be aggressive because passive species died out on our planet millions of years ago. Dr. Kethema spoke up, her voice filled with scientific curiosity despite her fear. But surely your advanced civilization has moved beyond such primitive instincts. Morrison laughed, but it was not an unkind sound. Doctor, we've learned to control our aggression, not eliminate it. When peaceful people are in danger, we use those instincts to protect them. What you saw today wasn't primitive behavior. It was evolution in action. The conversation was interrupted when Commander Hayes entered with a preliminary report. Captain, we finished searching the captured ships. We found evidence of raids on 17 different worlds, including attacks on Confederation research stations. The Krillians have been more active than intelligence reported. Morrison reviewed the data with growing anger. The files showed images of destroyed colonies, lists of enslaved populations, and records of systematic attacks on peaceful species. Hayes, make sure all this evidence gets transmitted to Confederation Command. These pirates have been busy. HFY looked at the human commander with new understanding. You are angry about what they did to others. This battle was not just about rescuing us. That's right, Morrison confirmed. You called for backup, but even if you hadn't, we would have stopped these raiders eventually. Bullies like Grakthol can only operate as long as no one fights back properly. Dr. Foster added, Captain, this incident is going to change everything. The Galactic Confederation has never seen military tactics like ours. They're going to want to understand how a single human ship defeated an entire pirate fleet. Over the next several hours, the humans worked with the Valerians to document everything that had happened. HFY dictated his report to the Confederation Council, carefully describing the human response to their distress call. His words would soon reach every major government in the galaxy. The species known as humans responded to our emergency call with immediate action, he reported. Despite facing overwhelming odds, they engaged hostile forces using tactics and weapons unknown to current galactic military doctrine. The enemy fleet was neutralized with minimal casualties to friendly forces. Dr. Kethema added her scientific observations. Human combat capabilities exceed all previous classifications. Their technology is not superior to ours, but their application of basic principles is devastatingly effective. They use simple kinetic weapons, aggressive maneuvering, and boarding tactics that other species consider impossible. The most important part of their report came at the end. HFY chose his words carefully, knowing they would reshape galactic politics. Recommendation to Confederation Command: humanity should be reclassified as a Tier 1 military power. All previous assessments were inadequate. These beings are natural warriors who use their abilities to protect the innocent. Diplomatic contact is strongly advised. Military confrontation is strongly discouraged. As the reports were transmitted across the galaxy, Captain Morrison prepared his own message to Earth Command. Mission completed successfully. Pirate fleet neutralized, hostages rescued, no friendly casualties. The galaxy now knows what humans can do when peaceful people call for help. 3 days later, the Horizon's Edge received an encrypted message from Earth. Humanity had been invited to establish a rapid response force for Confederation emergency situations. The galaxy's governments wanted these dangerous protectors on their side, not against them. Captain Morrison shared the news with his crew during their evening meal. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like our little rescue mission just made humanity a major galactic power. Command wants volunteers for the new emergency response fleet. Sergeant Rodriguez raised his coffee cup in a toast. To backup duty, Captain. Turns out the galaxy needed us more than they knew. As the Horizon's Edge jumped to hyperspace heading home to Earth, Captain HFY transmitted one final message. Captain Morrison, thank you for answering our call. The galaxy is safer because beings like you exist. Morrison's reply was simple. Anytime, Captain. Anytime.